Hello, everyone, and a very warm welcome to today's Linkability Insights live stream. I'm your host, Lynnaire Johnston. Thank you so much for joining us. We are today going to be talking to someone I have only recently met, but am in awe of, because she's been focusing on exactly the kind of topics that I'm interested in right now. If you've been following my adventures this year, you'll know that I've been very interested in talking to leaders and business owners about how they can be visible to AI. Now, this is a brand new subject, not only for me, but for everybody, because AI, of course, is making huge inroads into all of our businesses right now. I've been keen to find out how people who are leaders and business owners can make sure that their businesses themselves, their brand, and their personal profiles can be seen, discovered, and surfaced by AI. And my journey is taking me down some very interesting roads. So recently I came across Liane Davey and have been reading her very excellent book, ThoughtLoad, about which we are going to talk today. Now, before we bring Liane onto the stage and ask her to tell us a bit about ThoughtLoad, a quick note about what is going on here. And I would like to, first of all, say a very warm welcome to those of you who are joining us live, and a very special hi and big hugs from New Zealand to Meryl Cass, who is our connector extraordinaire. Meryl is excellent at inviting people to attend our events, and if you are here today because of him, thank you, and thank you, Meryl. We'll be inviting Liane to answer questions, some of which we might pop into the chat as we're talking today, and some of which we'll put into the questions at the end. So please put in your questions into the comments and any ideas or suggestions that you might have as well, because we are always very keen to hear from you. Right, so let's get into what we're talking about today. So where I want to take this conversation with Liane is this. I hear from senior leaders all the time that they are too busy, they have too much going on, their lives are too full, that there is too much work for them to bother about social media. I don't, of course, think that LinkedIn is social media, as well you know, but I see it as a business tool. However, the people that I'm working with do still see it as social media, and are not yet quite understanding the fact that LinkedIn is the second most cited source of answers to business questions asked of AI. That means if you're not on LinkedIn, you're not going to be discovered and surfaced by AI in answer to those questions. But how do we persuade those very busy leaders, because let's face it, they are, everybody's busy these days, how do we persuade those leaders to actually take note of content, of making sure that they are visible outside their organizations? And so that's what our conversation today with Liane Davey from Canada is going to be about. Liane, hello, and a very warm welcome. I love the fact that here I am in New Zealand talking to you in Canada, Toronto, if I'm correct about that.
Toronto, absolutely. And it is really nice to be with you, Lynnaire.
Well, thank you for joining us. And so I wanted just to mention a couple of things about you. First of all, a New York Times best-selling author. You're an advisor to executives at tiny little organizations that nobody's ever heard of, like Amazon and Walmart. And of course, you are the author of 3 books. You First. The second one was The Good Fight, and now ThoughtLoad, which is the one I'm reading at the moment. And each of those has a different angle, a different dimension, if you like, on how leaders think, work, and relate. So, Liane, let's start with ThoughtLoad. For anyone who hasn't read it yet, and I highly recommend that you do, available on Kindle, which is how I'm reading mine. What is ThoughtLoad as a concept, and why is it different from workload?
Yeah. So I started noticing as a organization scientist, as a student of organizations, I started noticing, probably just as we came out of the pandemic, that work isn't working. My clients are not accomplishing the things in their businesses they want, a lot of strategic projects not getting finished or not creating return on investment. So things in the business aren't kind of adding up the way we need to. And yet everyone is burned out and stressed. So I realized that work wasn't working, but this line I hear all the time, my workload's too heavy, it's too much. It didn't ring true for me because I couldn't see people getting much work done at all. I could relate myself that, sure, I feel very overwhelmed. At the end of the day, I'm exhausted, but I don't think it's because I got too much work done. And that's when I started to realize it wasn't the workload that was killing us. It was the thought load. So thought load is the invisible tax on our performance that comes from the combination. The load is two things: rising cognitive demands, so decision fatigue and cognitive load and all that we're expected to pay attention to, plus the increasing emotional burdens. Our world is becoming increasingly emotionally dysregulated, and there's a lot of stuff triggering us all day. So that's the load. Now imagine that load carried with a body, mind, and spirit that some days is incredibly depleted. So the bottom of the thought load equation is your energy reserves. And so those things, the neuroscience of those three is that each one amplifies and exacerbates the other. So, a lot of people want to talk about how heavy their workload is, and leaders and employees, I think, are into an argument at the moment because the employees are saying my workload's too high, and the leaders are saying, I don't see you getting that. And so they're really not understanding each other. And I think when we get clear on, can we all agree it's the thought load that's so high? And when our thought load is high, it's very hard for us to produce work, but very easy for us to get burned out. So that's the concept. And every time I talk about thought load, people are like, yeah.
Yeah, I can imagine the eyes light up. Well, it certainly did for me, because I could really see that there is so much going on. I mean, and I'm in the same boat, Liane. So many interactions, so many distractions, so many things, so many calls on my time, that I'm like a deer in the headlights some days, and I just stare at my screen and I go, I have so much to do. I have absolutely exactly. Well, I like the way that you identify three different drivers: so attention, emotions, and energy, right? And so are they all equally important, do you think, or does one of these tend to dominate?
Yeah. So there's on ThoughtLoad.com on the website, I have a little assessment, that an audit you can do to see which one of those three is the biggest for you. So what we're finding, we've got now about 1,000 respondents, which is really exciting. And we're seeing some of each. Some people, it's the just diluted attention that's really dragging them down. Some people, it's the emotional weight and that emotional residue. And other people, it's the energy. So we're seeing them all. I would say, if we think, if I think like a psychologist, I would say as soon as the emotional piece comes in there, it often supersedes all the others. So once you have a strong emotional component of your thought load, that's probably trumping the other two. But all three matter. And certainly the reason energy is in the denominator is that if your energy is low, a load that you could carry on a good day feels impossibly heavy. So each of them is very, very important in its own way. But I think it's helpful for individuals to take the quick little audit and see which is it for you.
Well, I just want to mention here your website, because I've had a look at it a couple of times over the last few days as I was preparing for this, and I'm just blown away by what's available on your website. So let me just be clear that it is ThoughtLoad.com, the name of the book, ThoughtLoad, one word, .com. And there is just a wealth of information and ideas and checklists and tips and information that you can download, and all freely available. I had signed up for some more of the deeper level information, but there's a lot of there that's absolutely free in the resources section. So do check it out. I was really blown away. It looks amazing, and there's some really, really cool stuff there, Liane. So thank you.
Great. Well, that was the idea. If we're going to address this problem that I think is facing all of us, it felt very important to me to get the tools into people's hands to make it. So
Well, I'm very pleased to have come across you. So, and this is something that's going to help me personally. In fact, that's what I do with these lives. I tend to ask people that I think have got something interesting to say about a topic that I'm personally interested in, or a problem that I am currently tackling myself. Right? Because I can ask legitimately my guests the questions that I want to have answered.
Exactly. Anyway. That's why I write books. I only write the books that I need to read. So ThoughtLoad was what was getting me down, to be honest. And I was like, I need to go deep into the research, crack this problem, spend a couple years figuring it out, and then share what I learned. So we're the same. You do lives about these things. I write books on the problems I need to solve.
Oh, well, I can't wait to see what the next book is going to be about. But let's deal with the first one first of all. Okay. So, excuse me. You make the case that the real problem isn't too much work. I absolutely get that. It's too much cognitive and emotional demand. So how do most leaders react when you put it to them that way? Do they resist it, or does it kind of do they go, oh my God, I absolutely get what you're talking about here?
Mostly people go, yes. I've had some funny feedback after the first few events, and people saying like, I have known I've had a problem for quite a while. I didn't know what it was. I didn't have a word for it. I was doing a book launch in Ottawa, in the Canadian capital, last night. And somebody afterwards came up to me and said, I honestly didn't know whether to laugh or cry, because it felt amazing to know this is a thing. And I'm not the only one feeling it. So for the most part, the only place where I find a little bit of an interesting response is the more that you're talking to usually a male, usually with that productivity bent, they'll start paraphrasing and just talking about cognitive load. And they're like, okay, so your book's about cognitive load. And I'm like, well, wait, that's one piece of it. So if there's a discomfort, the discomfort is we're okay with talking about decision fatigue and all that sterile. I don't even have a jacket on to make my straighten my tie, but that sort of stuff that feels safe in a corporate world, they'll go to cognitive load. And I would say the only resistance I get is having to take a second step and say that's a piece of it. But if we are downplaying how much of our thought load comes from the emotional burdens of the anxiety of what AI is going to do to our world, just if you think about our tariff on, tariff off, tariff on, tariff off, right. So if we think about our workplace and our thought load, and we try and ignore or downplay the emotional piece, so that's the only slight thing I often have to come back to and say, okay, I love that you're comfortable talking about the cognitive load, but this uncomfortable thing, which is that we actually are humans. And humans have emotions in our operating system. So that's the only thing. But for the most part, people are like, yes.
Well, I was a bit like that too, I have to say, as I've been working my way through the book too. I kind of almost felt like you must have a camera in the top corner of my office looking at me, as if you've written the book about me directly. But you talk about the attention, right, being the first driver. So what does distracted attention actually look like in a senior leader? And what are the telltale signs that you observe?
Yeah. So I would say one thing is they're not clear about what matters most. They have a list of 11 priorities, like these 11 things, they all matter. They're all urgent. And as I talk about in the book, the word priority comes from the Latin priori, which means first, and existed in our language for 500 years before anyone thought to make it plural, because you can't have more than one first. And I think the biggest mistake leaders make is they miss that point. They think that you can pay attention to everything at once, that everything can be equally important. So they don't have a clear priority. I think the other thing is they let their folks get so focused on just activity, doing stuff, without clarifying what's the outcome we're looking for. So the start of the book takes you through this differentiation between, you can focus on activity and all you will become is busy. You can focus on outputs and become productive. But I believe that leaders are falling into a tremendous trap right now, which is being so enamored of productivity. We can push out so much output, especially now with AI. We can push out so much output, but all you're going to become then is productive. Only if you shift your focus to outcomes do you become effective. So just producing a lot of stuff that doesn't move the needle is not helpful, and it's burning us all out. So I think that's, some of the most important things that leaders are missing is they don't have their eyes on the prize. They're really paying attention, diluting the attention of the whole organization. And as a result, people don't know where to look, and they just get trapped trying to, run on the treadmill as fast as they possibly can. So that's a huge problem right now.
I would agree with that. And we hear a lot about productivity and ways to be more. Yeah, exactly. But it's
way to turn out more stuff that doesn't make a difference.
No, well, that's exactly right.
Reports are a great example, right? Oh, my people sent out 7 reports. I'm like, and what in the world changed because of those reports? I don't care that you're productive.
Right. And are people actually reading them, or are they just giving them to their AIs and saying, you read this and give me a summary, which I find is a real trap, to be fair, because then you don't have the knowledge of what's in a report. I don't see a lot of reports, but the ones that I do decide to take the time to read are really important for me to learn. And I want to be able to then say what information I've learned from them, not have to go to somebody. Oh, that's a great question. I'll just go and ask my AI what was in that report that I didn't actually read myself, and it just provided a summary.
And the other thing to add to that, along with this distracted attention, is one of the things that we're losing is depth of processing. And as a psychologist, we know that depth of processing is critical for not only remembering things, but being able to glean insight from them. And we're just not processing anything deeply. Reading things digitally, we know, doesn't go in the same way. Digital retention, after 48 hours, you retain like 20% of the information. So we're doing a lot where, because we're distracted and diluted, we're kind of like scrolling through things and we are not retaining it, and therefore we are not able to get insight from it. So that's another piece of the puzzle with attention.
Well, I think we'll come back to all of that, because I think that's really at the base of the issue here that I'm wanting to look at today. But let me just finish off with the other 2 parts about your book that I wanted to talk about. And so emotions as a productivity driver, less obvious than what we've been talking about. So why does the emotional dimension matter so much for someone who is trying to go into deep, focused work?
Yeah, because, we are emotional creatures. Emotions are the base of our system. And so if something triggers us and tells us that we are unsafe, that's going to preclude all other action going on. Everything is going to go to, okay, make me safe. And we know fight, flight, freeze, or fawn, right? We're going to go into some very primal response. So if we are not noticing our emotions, processing those emotions, and turning them into useful data, they will move into feelings. So most people don't know emotions and feelings are 2 different things. Emotions are complex physiological responses. They're preconscious, they're non-negotiable. And feelings are the cognitive stories and narratives we put on, we kind of rationalize to explain what we're experiencing in our bodies. So we need to be good at recognizing I'm having an emotional response here. What can I learn from it? What data can I extract from it before I turn it into some grand fiction that derails all my work, all my productivity? So it's really important that we know how to emotionally regulate ourselves, but also as a leader, that you recognize that this is going on around the table in your team and get good at stopping the emotional contagion that will spread and totally take out your productivity. So it's a big piece of the puzzle. And so when people try and equate thought load with cognitive load, I'm like, no, you're failing the test because you've only got 33%. We have to appreciate and really increase both our emotional literacy, which I think is terrible. We don't have the language to talk about the difference between feelings and emotion or these sorts of things. And then our skill set in how to process an emotion so we get the data and avoid the drama. Very important.
Oh, I like that. Get the data, avoid the drama. We could all learn that one, couldn't we? And the final section, the energy piece of this. And you say that low energy isn't a signal to do more. It's a signal to do less. I like that idea. I'm not very good at doing less. I have to say, personally, I find this very difficult. But that is counterintuitive for high achievers, right?
Yeah.
So how do you get that message to land with people?
You know what? It's interesting. It's counterintuitive for high achievers at a certain level. The truest high achievers, I'm going to like the Warren Buffett types, are very good at this. They prioritize this. So, what am I talking about? I'm talking about how so much of our day, probably for many people, their entire waking day is filled with some kind of input going into their brain. They're reading something, they're listening to a podcast, they have the news on in the car, the TV is on. There is never a time when there is no input. And we know the brain has a default mode network. It has a network that kind of comes on, lights up when nothing else is coming in. And that's the part of the brain that makes connections, creates insight. It's a part of the brain that energizes us, cleans things up, and lets us kind of get value and get breath and oxygen in. And so if you constantly have input, you are never accessing this incredibly essential part of your brain. And that makes thought load so much higher. There's other interesting stuff. Microsoft's been looking at if people do back to back meetings, they've been putting them in EEG caps and looking at their beta waves and looking at how the beta waves just like build on each other and build and build and build and build. And it only takes a 10-minute break to come back to baseline. But mostly what we're doing is we're just building and building and building and just not getting ourselves into an optimal space for creativity, for openness. We're getting into a space where we go to old playbooks, where we're judgmental and impatient. So we need to think about our energy differently. And one of the best things we can do to boost our energy is actually take a 45-minute chunk. I'm doing this right now. In the book, I call it a 2-week cleanse. I'll take a 2-week period and get 5 or 6 times where I spend an hour with zero input over those 2 weeks. Yesterday, I was in Ottawa. I gave a presentation in the morning and I had a couple of hours before the next presentation. I went and I sat on a patio and I had some lunch with no input at all. And it was incredible how many ideas kind of consolidated, how much more energized I felt. So how do you find some time to turn off the input? And we do that very rarely anymore, to our detriment.
I am the same. I find it really difficult not to have inputs. If I'm walking, I'm listening to a podcast. And of course, I've just started to contribute to the noise in the podcast field myself, because I've just launched a new podcast called the Visibility Advantage podcast, available wherever you listen to your podcast.
Wherever fine podcasts are, yes.
But if I'm driving, I'm listening to an audiobook or I'm listening to something. And the only time, and I've only just started doing this recently, the only time that I really have no inputs is when I'm in the garden. And I used to
that's a good one.
Listening to things in the garden, an audiobook or a podcast or whatever. But now I've started not doing that and actually doing nothing or listening to nothing but the birds and hearing nothing except my thoughts. And I'm finding that is a really good way just to get that time in when I'm not having all of those inputs, because often if I'm exercising, I'm listening to something or I'm reading something. And then, of course, anytime you're at your desk, you've always got inputs coming from all kinds of places, don't you?
Yeah.
And so I think that sometimes even music can be an input.
Yeah, we don't want music here. You got it. Yeah.
No,
So you need to keep your list. So I've been recording these. I'm going to release them as a series of videos. One of my favorite ones is a puzzle. Just leaving out a puzzle And then when you're after I have my cup of tea after dinner, just spend a little while just working on the puzzle. It's amazing how I'll have all sorts of creative thoughts, all sorts of goodness. So I have a whole list of things that are really good. Gardening is very high on the list, but things that you can do with no input to give your brain a chance to get the nourishment of all the raw materials that are in that brain pantry, but that haven't been exposed to the air and aren't nourishing.
Can you tell me then, why is it that I have really good ideas when I'm in the shower?
Well, that's exactly why, right? That's exactly why. So it's the one place where certainly my kids often will take their phone and blast the music in the shower. They don't even want that amount of time. But for most of us, the shower is 10 minutes of, and sometimes, it's like, I'm going to do a second lather because I'm enjoying time to, enjoying this time with no input. So that's exactly why the shower is great, is because it's one of the only places in your whole life where your brain is like, oh, finally.
Exactly. But I've also find that if you have a speaker and having in the bathroom and you're listening to music while you're having a shower, you don't get those thoughts. So I am not going to. Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? No, really. But so yes, I think I'll just do an extra lather next time. So thank you. All right, so let's move on to about debunking the too busy myth. So because here's where I want to take this, because I work, as you know, with senior leaders on their visibility. So and on their LinkedIn presence in particular, thought leadership, their profile outside the organization, which is are well known inside their companies, and particularly at a higher level and bigger companies. But outside that, nobody's ever heard of them. AI's never heard of them. And so I am constantly saying, well, how do we get you visible? And they just say, I'm just too busy to be thinking about that. But my argument is that this is a priority, one priority, not priorities here. This is a priority for you if you want to advance in your career, if you want to be offered conference keynotes, if you want to be networking with people at the highest level. This is something that you need to be paying attention to. And it's not just LinkedIn, but that is a key platform. It is outside that as well. And you do need to be working to make sure that other people know who you are and what you do. So making the time for this kind of thing is important. Now, you've already shared with us some ways to be able to do that. But when a leader says, I don't have time, let alone to write something for LinkedIn, they don't have time to think, right? They obviously need to turn that speaker off in the shower too. What is going on from a ThoughtLoad perspective, and how can we turn that around in our senior leaders to get them to see, first of all, that this is something that they should be putting into their ThoughtLoad bucket, not just going, oh no, I'm just too busy, this really isn't important to me.
So I don't know about you, but I just adore when someone tells me they don't have time, because I'm always like, who has more time than you?
Level playing field, 24 hours every day for everyone. Yeah.
I have flown home from New Zealand and crossed the international date line and got a few extra hours like that. Okay. But other than that, what do you mean you don't have time? You have exactly the same amount of time as the rest of us. So on busy, busy just says to me, oh, so your priorities aren't clear. Like you haven't figured out what matters and what doesn't. And people use busy as a badge of honor. And to me, busy is just an admission of defeat, right? So if every time you go to use the word busy, you just, and I'm okay with people being vulnerable and admitting defeat, right? I have not. So I always say, sometimes you're riding the wave and sometimes you're face down in the sand getting pummeled by it. I'm okay with people saying, this is a week where I'm face down eating sand, getting pummeled by the wave. But let's be clear that that's what busy means. So what I would be talking about is, okay, well, to me, what it sounds like is your clients haven't connected their visibility to an outcome or a quest that they do think is important. So for example, for me, one of my outcomes I'm driving toward is more international keynote speaking, right? That's a very important outcome for me. Well, so then the time that I spent on LinkedIn that caused you to be exposed to my work to say, hey, I'd like to, bring you on my live and expose you to an international audience. Bing, 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 bing. Wow. Like time very well spent because I was very clear. It may be that somebody's they want to write a book or be perceived as a thought leader. All right. So the outcome is about your credibility and your credibility to a particular target audience. So I think one of the things is if we disconnect the activity from the outcome, then it doesn't feel like a priority. It just feels like something on a very long to-do list that I don't have time to get to. But if we're clear about this is the most important thing for my business or my career, and then we're thinking about how can I use visibility, whether it be speaking at a local chamber of commerce event or at an industry conference or posting something on LinkedIn, then all of a sudden we see those things as, deeply connected to an outcome that we value. All of a sudden, people will find time for it. But what they see it as is just like, oh, that's just like people trying to impress other people. I'm like, well, then you're doing it wrong. If that's what you think it is. But if you want people to think of you as an expert, great. What are you sharing out to the world that cause people to go, oh, that's so interesting. Wow. Lynnaire shared that. And that was, she must be really well connected, or she must be in the know, or right. So it's how do I connect the activity to a business outcome or career outcome that matters to me? How do I do the output and the activity in a way that advances that outcome? And then all of a sudden it's going to come way up the priority list as I do it with a different lens. But I think most of us just think like, ugh. The other thing I'll say is that we know that batching tasks is much more efficient. So there are so many tools now. I use Planable. And Planable is a great tool for scheduling LinkedIn content. So I will read a really interesting new scientific study and I'll just pull it into Planable and say, at some point next month, I try to have 2 interesting new scientific articles a month. Okay, I've put it there. I don't have to think about it. And then I'll take a couple of hours a month and say, okay, I'm going to turn this stuff in and I'll schedule it. And then it's all done. So batching it to say, is your career and your visibility and your credibility worth a couple of hours a month? Absolutely. So do it that way so that it doesn't feel like I have to think about LinkedIn all day, every day. So task batching can be really helpful, but making sure that you've thought through how to use these visibility tools in a way that supports the outcomes you're looking for.
I think that's the real answer to this entire question. It wasn't something I'd thought through because, people like Warren Buffett, who you've mentioned, or Simon Sinek, and, people that are really well known for their ideas, obviously take the time to come up with those ideas, right? Now, I bet they don't, they might have the germ of an idea in the shower, but I bet they have to spend some time really working, closing their door, turning off all their distractions, and then thinking these things through. And would that be probably how those people who are renowned thinkers do this, achieve this? Because I bet it's not because they've got thousands of things going on in their lives all the time, every day.
I think about it a lot like comedy specials on Netflix. Like, I think people expect that all of these things should just be like, oh, and then I did the amazing comedy special on Netflix. And they miss that those comedians had like a 2-minute little bit that they try out, and they try it in open mic nights over and over, and they say it to their spouse at home, and then they try it and that stuff has been worked and worked and worked 2 minutes at a time, or a tight 10. And all of that, like 3 years later, can be a 1-hour Netflix special. So I think we miss that if you want to have substantive work that changes your brand in the marketplace, that has you perceived as an expert, that what I love about LinkedIn is I can do one of those little 2-minute little ideas and just see, did it resonate? Did I get a lot of comments? Did some of the comments shape the idea for me? Can I then go the next day and use it at a consulting engagement and see what they think? Can I then work it into a speech? And all of that iterating on your ideas. You know, you don't become Simon Sinek or Warren Buffett. Simon Sinek didn't start as just like, oh, you know, start with why and blah, and charging $100,000 for an hour of his time. He started with like, you know, he probably noticed that people were asking the wrong questions, and he helped one person, you know, get to, no, stop thinking about what you need to do. Think about why. And that has grown into a giant empire, right? But I think we all want to just start with the Netflix special. Like,
yeah. Like rock and roll bands. Like rock and roll bands take 20 years to become an overnight success, don't they?
Exactly. Yeah. And I relate to that. Like, I've been using LinkedIn for 20 years. And, you know, every time it's like, it's slowly growing, and my following is slowly growing, because every time I just try and authentically add something, be of service, something genuine, and you know, make sure the ideas are very high quality. And then I try and do something that stops the scroll, because I know a lot about attention. And so I know that if it's a stock image that just looks too sterile, people will scroll right past. And if it's an image of me where I have like 3 chins, that everybody's stopping. So you'll see a lot of like this on my LinkedIn because I've learned that works. But that's because I have posted thousands of posts, and I pay attention and I see what's working.
Well, that makes a lot of sense to me. Can you tell me about flow? I'm interested in the concept of flow and what that means and how it works.
Yeah. So flow, not my concept, but flow. And I Flow, the scientist who created flow, Mikhail, and his last name I cannot pronounce. So somebody can put it in the chat, the proper name of the scientist behind the concept of flow. But flow is that moment when you engage with work in a way that all of a sudden you lose all sense of time. It feels almost as if the muse is channeling through you. Your fingers can't type fast enough to keep up with the idea. It is this fully energized state of being where the work is coming out of you. It is truly wonderful. It is, you know, it's both creative, it's highly productive, but the problem is that it doesn't come in 11 minutes. And we know that the average person's work is interrupted. They stop whatever they're doing every 11 minutes. And so if you are allowing yourself to be taken off task after 11 minutes, you will never get the benefit of working in flow. So you want to have at least 45 minutes. I would say more like 90 minutes that you want to have a chunk of time. You want to have all notifications turned off. You want your phone out of your line of sight. You want to have what I call mise en place. So just like a chef before they start to cook, because chefs like to be in flow. So they have the parsley chopped and the onions and the this and that all in little nice dishes. So the same is true of us. If you go to start to work on something, trying to find this flow state, and then you're like, oh, right, I needed that report that Lynnaire sent me. And you open your email, I promise you, you're going down a rat hole of the 5 emails that have come in, right? And you're losing the thread. So we know we can create a flow state when we have enough time, when we have no distractions, when we have everything prepared in advance, and we have a reasonably challenging, interesting goal to master. That's how we set ourselves up for the flow state. And I would say most people would tell me they don't even get one period of flow state in the average work week. And that's a huge waste.
I guess part of that is because to other people, it doesn't seem like work. You know, if you close your office door and you say to people, I'm not available for the next 90 minutes, I'm going to be thinking, then they go, well, but that's not working. And if you know, you might, if you're a senior leader, that might be acceptable. But if you're the next level down, spending 90 minutes or even 45 minutes just thinking and doing nothing can be really seen to be almost lazy. So it's kind of like again, it's something that I think that as a society we've moved away from. We've got so busy, we've forgotten that we really do need to be thinking about these things. All of the things that we use, the technology that we use, the apps, everything that we use every single day, the music that we listen to, doesn't come by being busy all the time. It comes by sitting and having some time to think about all of the things that are important to us. And I think that we probably need to be working a bit harder to move back to those kinds of the acceptability of it, really. And allowing our team members or our leaders of any stripe or denomination really to take the time to think things through and just spend time letting your brain do the work. Might help us to sleep more too, actually.
Oh, it absolutely would, right? Because, right now, a lot of the processing that we're not doing during the day, actually, I don't have it on my pile at the moment. I'm reading a book called The Brain Never Sleeps by Karen von Kampen. And it's about the value of dreaming in all of this. And right now, so much of that work is having to shift over to our dream life because we're not providing that time when we're awake. So fascinating.
Fascinating. I work on LinkedIn all day and then I dream about LinkedIn at night. That explains.
Exactly. So I just want to differentiate between two things. There's the no input time, and then there's the flow state. In flow state, what you're focused on is output, right? So lots will come out. It is really important. If you haven't had that thinking time and no input time, it will be very difficult to get into the flow state. So you do want to pair them together. But in the flow state, people are going to feel, they're going to hear your fingers flying. They're going to see a lot of stuff come out. So that's what we need to do is help normalize, again, to your point, that we need the time, the soak time, the time for, maybe in the middle of the workday, I'm going to take a 30-minute walk and just think about this or let the ideas go. And then the time where it's like, I'm going to close the door and I'm going to take 90 minutes to turn that into something that's going to move the needle for us. So yes, thank you so much. Thank you so much. I don't know who this was, Meryl. So Meryl did it as well. A couple folks did. Thank you.
Oh, okay. So well done. No wonder you can't pronounce.
Well, when I recorded the audiobook of ThoughtLoad, I did work and rehearse and practice to get it right. So I think it's right in the audiobook, but no, I can't remember.
Okay, well, we'll take it off the stage so that then we can say, well, it's not there. Couldn't see it. So,
but Mihaly is brilliant. This work is brilliant. It's very important.
All right. Well, thank you for the people in the comments who are adding ideas and bits and pieces. And hello to our friends that I've seen there. So Felipe, hello, and Leslie, hello to you as well. So let us move on to where I'm really interested in taking this today, because as I say, it's about helping leaders to understand the importance of taking the time to become visible, either on LinkedIn or elsewhere, or preferably both. So where I'm coming from with this one, Liane, is that these days people, you and I and everybody else, how we search for people and search for things and search for ideas has changed. So a lot of times we might still find things on LinkedIn, but often we will, instead of going to Google and asking for information about something, we will go direct to our AI and pop the question in and get either a much more direct answer that may or may not be correct, or it'll take down the garden.
Minor detail.
Completely, and end up going, I had no idea about that because it's not even true. But I think that this change in the way that we search is only beginning to affect wider ideas and the way people think and work. And so with that, what that means is that if you want to be known for creating the term flow or the why, and also with ThoughtLoad, you need to be making the time to make all that happen. But a lot of people are not seeing that is important to them. So, I mean, at your level, it's obvious that taking the time to work through those things obviously is going to be critical. But for somebody who's running a team, has a lot of different inputs, a lot of demands from their board, from their team members, from their stakeholders, shareholders, customers, all those kind of things. How can we persuade them that this is important and not even just for being visible, which is obviously where my interest lies, but for themselves and for developing their own creativity, their own ideas and their own identity, if you like, with the unique thoughts that only they can have from their own experience? Or is this really too much to ask of people in this day and age?
No, I don't think it's too much to ask of people at all. So let's start with the business. So I facilitate business strategy for execs. So I always start with the business lens. So one of the things that's interesting now is I feel like people, and I think Edelman has research on this, right? People don't trust corporations anymore. They trust individuals. So, whatever your role is in your organization, whether it is in, attracting investors or building the confidence of investors, attracting potential customers, prospects, other partners, vendors, strengthening your role in the ecosystem, your company, if you check out your company's LinkedIn, and all the stuff that they put out and how few people look at it or engage with it or whatever. And the difference if you put something out about what your company is doing. So first of all, there are very few roles in organizations where it's not important for you to be a part of a vibrant ecosystem. If you're in finance, understanding the leading edge of what's happening in the finance profession, if you're in IT, it doesn't matter where you are, even if you're not in a traditional go-to-market function or product function, you still have a role in strengthening the position of your organization in the ecosystem in which you belong. Right. And that's going to come in handy when you need to find the next client, or you need to find another organization that has had this same supply chain issue as you, or whatever it is. So I think if you start, there's a very important business purpose for raising visibility, for strengthening credibility, for improving, enhancing, strengthening ties in the ecosystem. So that's just your job and your role. Now, as an individual, I think there's a million reasons, but one of them is career security is not what it used to be. And if you come on, and I see this every once in a while, somebody who, I was just looking at a LinkedIn profile of somebody who has lasted since like 2000, he's never had a job for more than 2 years and 4 months.
Wow.
Which does make you go like, interesting. But if that person is just in a job, no posts, and then all of a sudden a bunch of posts just when they're out of work and then not it, right? You go like, this is a person who is not actually invested in their own capability. They're not investing in their brand. And what does that say about them? Right. So, making sure that you are keeping those networks alive, that you are showing the world what you're interested in, all those sorts of things are essential. And it's the other thing I would say is that we don't want to just use these things in broadcast mode. I think one of the best things that you can do on LinkedIn is find things that are interesting and put a meaningful comment. So, that's LinkedIn becomes terrible when it's everybody just broadcasting and no one listening. So actually spending the time to go on and find, has someone shared an interesting article? Have they shared a take on something that made you think differently? Go in and engage meaningfully in the comments there. That's going to do as much to raise your profile, make people think you're a thoughtful person who's not just, self-aggrandizing. So I don't understand how in this day and age, with career security where it is, with the importance of human connection where it is, I don't understand how people can not see that this is just part of your obligation to yourself, to your own career, but also to your organization.
Well, I am so pleased to hear you say that, because sometimes, it's all very well me saying that, but from someone with your expertise and your scientific background, for you to hear you say that is very cheering indeed, because of course, what you're saying is exactly the right information that people need to hear. Engaging with people, being consistent on LinkedIn, and not just using it when you need a new job. Making sure that your profile really does talk clearly about who you are and what you do and the value that you bring. And seeing LinkedIn as something that is a marathon. It's not a sprint. It happens over a long period of time. And the word trust. You brought the word in, trust. You talked about trusting individuals and not so much brands. And I absolutely agree with that, because that's how people like to do business. We like to do business with people we know, like, and trust. But organizations seem to be moving away from that and making it harder and harder for all of us to be able to interact with a member of their organization. They're putting bots in the way or websites, and making it very difficult for us. I remember the days, Liane, when you could pick up the phone and talk to people. I know, shocking, isn't it? And that doesn't
it was a better time. It was all of the, the bots and the technology in recruiting right now, it is so dehumanizing and demoralizing. And I think organizations are going to end up with exactly what they deserve, right? That we're people are not going to bring their discretionary effort to a place that wasn't willing to have the discretionary effort to have someone talk to them in the hiring process, right?
Tell me about your own LinkedIn journey. I'm fascinated. You said you've been on the platform for 20 years. So it was a very different beast back then. It's only, I think the platform itself is only 22 or 23 years old. So you're obviously a really early adopter.
I was I got the thing from LinkedIn giving me the, you've been on for 20 years, happy anniversary. This was your first post. This is the person you engage with the most. It was a fun data thing. The person I engage with the most is Ron Tite, Tite. If folks don't follow Ron, his LinkedIn is best in class at somebody using LinkedIn. I adore Ron's LinkedIn and follow it religiously. My journey, I used to be in a consulting firm, and so I probably didn't use it. I used it to try and when I would consult with a team, I would try to make sure that I connected with the people who were in the team. So and you know what? People will tell me, I actually had this recently, somebody who was a member of a team I worked with 11 years ago. 11 years ago. I hadn't spoken with her. I had no idea that she had felt very positively about the contribution that I had made. And 11 years later, because of LinkedIn, she was able to find me again. She has hired me to work this year with her team, because you just always, you're not right there. You're not with them. But for 10 years, every once in a while, she would just get oh, there's Liane. Yeah. Oh, sounds like she's doing some oh, she's got another book out. Oh, right. Just that little bit to stay in someone's consciousness. The other thing I would say, if you see the data, about 95% of buyers are not in a sales cycle at any given moment. Only 5% are. And a buyer could be someone looking for talent. You don't have to think about it as buying a product. 95% of team leaders aren't looking for someone to help them with team effectiveness at any given moment. But if in the 95% of time that they're not needing it, they see something interesting from me, it kind of goes by and they're like, oh, then when they do need it, in that 5% of time, I'm going to be the first one that comes to mind for them. And I think so many of us just think that, nobody said anything. Nobody wrote back. No, I can't show how this lead came specifically from this LinkedIn post, so it's not worth it. I cannot tell you the number of times people write to me now and say, I've been following you since I saw you at this event in Nashville in whatever, 2007. You have followed me since 2007, and this is the first note you are ever. I love your work. Great, but what? So my journey has been one of doing a lot of trust the process, doing a lot of try and be of service. I have had to learn about what kind of content is of service. I've had to learn a lot more in the last couple of years about what stops the scroll. I've had to learn a lot more about meaningfully engaging, because now the algorithm is getting really narrow. It's serving me up the same stuff. So I'll have to search a term, find a person that's outside of my network, and go and engage with their work. And then it'll open up my algorithm a little bit. So you have to use it like any other tool. You have to be wise about it. But if you start with trying to be of service, and you remember that it is a place to build relationships, not just to broadcast content. So you are commenting on other people's work. You're sharing things that they've done to lift them up. You're actually getting into the DMs. And I ended up in the DMs today with someone who, like me, is really into factories. And we traded stories about what kinds of factories she's toured. And if you treat it that way, it will give back to you what you put into it. But it won't necessarily do it in a way that you'd be like, oh, this thing came from this post. No, nothing with brand is so easily attributable, right?
You definitely have a camera in the top corner of my office. Those are exactly the kinds of things that I tell people again and again and again. LinkedIn is about relationships, and it's about being here over time and being visible to the right people at the right time. And that just takes consistency. So let's take this into a practical level. I could talk to you for another couple of hours. But
me too.
You have a life to live. So.
Oh, that's just a rumor. It's not true.
Oh, it's just a rumor. Okay, you've got another book to write anyway.
Exactly.
So if a senior leader is listening or watching or following what we're talking about today, excuse me, and recognizing themselves in what we've talking about today, and their thought load is high, and they know they're not as visible as they should be, what is one thing, just one thing, that you'd ask them to do this week?
Yeah, this week, go figure out what's the most important outcome, either for your business or your career, that you need to make headway on. Start there. Once you get out of this frenetic, long to-do list activity focus, and you get to, our company has got a new launch coming up. The most important thing is that we reach this new demographic. Maybe that's the outcome. Or I need to boost my credibility as someone who does gap accounting. I don't care what the thing is. But this week, just figure out what is the outcome that you need to be focused on. Once you see that, it will be so much easier to see all the stuff that's filling your week that isn't advancing that could clear out to make some space. But also all the opportunities, all the messages you could be sharing, the comments, the things you want to read. So as soon as you're clear on what's the one outcome that I need to move the needle on, all of this will fall into place much more easily.
Wow. Well, I'm going to take that advice myself, because I have never looked at it in that way at all. And I think that is a really great way, a great shift of your thoughts to be able to think about the outcome, put that first, and then everything follows, Liane. That is really excellent. Okay, so just quickly remind us about the book and about where people can find you and about your website. Let's just finish on that, because I would really like people to be able to know all of that.
Okay, so the book is ThoughtLoad, Manage the Madness and Free Your Team to Do Great Work. Available everywhere in paper, Kindle, digital, and audiobook. So you can get it. And it's crazy me narrating the audio. So if that doesn't scare you off, and then connect with me here on LinkedIn, please. That would be wonderful, so that we can have those conversations. And then we'll end on ThoughtLoad.com, and you'll see there's a couple of assessments to measure your own thought load. And what my favorite assessment is the one that helps you figure out, what does your brand of overwhelm look like? And will help you with some resources specifically for your type of overwhelm. And on there, you'll see the link to Thought World, which is what you were alluding to, this community we're building. So far, there are 45 resources on there can
Wow.
download, use with your teams. But we've got a list of 120 we're building, and we're soon going to open up the community functionality in there so that we can share and learn with each other. I'm going to do some live stuff in there. So Thought World, everything you need to manage your thought load and the thought load of those around you. So, yep, ThoughtLoad.com.
ThoughtLoad.com and ThoughtLoad the book at Amazon, which I, as I say, am thoroughly enjoying. And I love your writing style, Liane. Not afraid to talk about having made mistakes, which I think is the mark of a true leader. So I do so appreciate you spending time with us today, all the way from Toronto in Canada. It's been an absolute joy to talk with you. And I have a feeling that we might be having more conversations.
Oh, that'd be lovely.
And perhaps I can be part of your community as well when you get that all happening, because that sounds
wonderful.
Like a place I would like to spend time as well. So thank you so much for being here with us today. Thank you to everybody who joined us live. Thank you to Meryl Cass for inviting people along today and making sure that the comments flew. So if you would like to connect with Liane, please do so. If you are not connected to me, shame on you. Do reach out. I'm always keen to share my ideas about LinkedIn, as you can probably imagine. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. We'll see you again very soon. Bye for now.